So tell me you've never studied ancient religions without telling me you've never studied ancient religions and how your prophecies are bullshit. Okay, so this person is saying, based on my Epic of Gilgamesh video and how the Genesis story has a lot of similarities to the Epic of Gilgamesh, is saying that the only problem with this is that none of these other religions line up with prophecies. You've made prophecies this larger than it should be idea, because here's the facts. If you read the Epic of Gilgamesh, you would realize that there are absolutely zero prophecies in the Epic of Gilgamesh. It is merely telling the story of how those people came to be and the different aspects of those stories, the heroes, the gods, the goddess, the storms, society's rises and society's falls. There are no prophecies in the Epic of Gilgamesh, but you obviously have never actually read the Epic of Gilgamesh. Otherwise, you would have known that and you would not have made that statement. You haven't read the Artahesis. You haven't read any of the ancient writings, whether it's the Kemetic or the Indus or anybody else. You've only read your Bible and think that you can articulate what other religions and people of ancient times believed in, but you have no clue. Now, you talk about the prophecies of the Bible actually happening. As I said in my reply to your comment, the prophecies of your Bible never happened because they weren't prophecies, but they were actually people writing after the event and then claiming it to be prophecy by backdating the information. So in like your book of Daniel mentions Darius. And if you accepted that Daniel was the writer of the entire book of Daniel, then you would say he mentions Darius explicitly. But archaeological linguistics have demonstrated that the book of Daniel was not written in its entirety by the prophet Daniel, and that after a certain point, you can tell that it is written by someone who is writing after the Babylonian captivity, which at that point, they would have known about Daniel, and they wrote it in such a way to make it seem like prophecy. In the same way that Genesis is written thousands of years after the event supposedly have happened. The Exodus is written thousands of years after the supposedly events have happened. So too with the book, with Leviticus and Numbers and so on and so forth. So this is why Moses is talking about his own death and what happens after his death, yet he's supposed to be the author because it's written by someone else hundreds of years later. The book of Isaiah is written over a 200-year period by different authors, which demonstrates that they are writing based on already seen and known history in order to make it be prophecy. Your New Testament is written decades and centuries after the supposedly events happened to make it seem like prophecy. And that brings me to your Deuteronomy 28. Your Deuteronomy 28 is talking about the Israelites being shipped off on boats to Mizraim, Egypt, to which is where they will try to set, listen clearly, listen, Linda, they will try to sell themselves as slaves and there will be no buyers. Deuteronomy 28 has absolutely nothing to do with the transatlantic or the trans-Saharan slave trade. And in this case, really, it's just the transatlantic slave trade, because the people involved in the transatlantic slave trade were not trying to sell themselves. The people in the transatlantic slave trade came to the Americas and not Mizraim. Even if you try to use it as an allegory, it doesn't work. Also, when they got to the Americas, there were plenty of buyers. That in itself should zip it. You should just zip it right there. But let's look at another aspect of this story that you don't even realize. Do you realize that there are Jewish people who were in Europe and in Northern Africa and in the Middle East and in the Indus Valley area who, after their expulsion from Judea by Titus in 70 AD, and the Jewish diaspora spread it out, and the overwhelming majority of them were sent to Egypt. Yes. So when you study and go look at the Titus conquering Judea, In normal Roman fashion, once a rebellious area has been conquered, oftentimes a large majority of them are sent out as slaves to other provinces of the empire. The same thing that the northern Israelites experienced with the Assyrians, and the same thing that they experienced with the Babylonians. So Rome, doing the same thing, dispersed them throughout the Roman Empire. Primarily, they went to Egypt. And they went to Egypt, they could not find work. They could not find the ability to make a living for themselves. And that population suffered because there were no buyers. So when this is being looked upon, if you want to say any prophecy happened, that would be the prophecy, but pertaining to the people who in 70 AD, not to the people who came to the Americas by force, who had plenty of buyers. And here's the thing, 28 doesn't even really prophesize the 70 AD, 70 CE diaspora. No, you know why? Because they weren't slaves for 400 years. That's why. They still weren't slaves for 400 years. And then upon that 400-year ending, they did not return back to Israel and reclaim their land. Think about it. 70 CE, 400 years is 470 CE. In 470 CE, the Roman Empire still controlled Judea. As a matter of fact, it is in 481 CE that Theodosius makes Christianity the ruling religion over the entire Roman Empire that included Judea. So when did any person claiming to be Jewish or Israelite get it? 1947? 1947. We're talking about almost 1900 years later. So therefore, Deuteronomy 28 does not even fit those people. It is just a proclamation that somebody wrote with wishful ass thinking because they had, according to their story, they had just been freed from captivity in Egypt. And so in their minds, Egypt was going to remain a dominant power because Egypt had been a dominant power for over 3,000 years during the time frame of the writing of Deuteronomy. So they thought the kingdom, the empire, would still be there 400 years later. But guess what? Egypt was not a dominant empire during the time frame of 70. It was a Roman province in 70 CE. Remained under Roman control for the next 400-500 years or so. So it doesn't equal your prophecies. And none of your prophecies equal out. Your prophecies are merely what people have taken and happening in their lives and then force it to fit what was written at that time frame. Revelations was meant for the people at that time frame. Jesus was supposed to come back before Paul and that generation died, but he didn't. So now it just goes on for generation and every generation and generation and generation. None of your prophecies are real. If that's the case, I can do the same thing with the prophecies of Nostradamus and put them that he predicted Hitler. He predicted World War I. He predicted World War II. He predicted many of the aircraft and fighting machines that we have today. He predicted the crash of 1929. I can say that Nostradamus predicted all of those things because you can look at some of his vague ass writings and put them on those time frames, which is what many people do. So if prophecies is your validation, then Nostradamus is God or the son of God or an angel of God or something of that sense. And I'm pretty sure that in Islam, there are plenty of things that people can claim as prophecies that are happening today. Hell, I can prophesize that the world would end up being in a World War III scenario again. I can prophesize that there will be droughts and famines. It's going to happen. I can prophesize that we're going to have a cold ass winter this year. And it's more than likely going to be so because everything works in a cycle and everything happens over and over again. So prophecies is a bullshit way of trying to determine whether your God exists or whether your book is right. And Deuteronomy 28, black people, get off that. You look foolish trying to make yourselves into somebody that you're not. And always remember, always remember you got to free yourself to be yourself because your greatness is non-negotiable. Good journey, good vibrations.